everyone, and welcome to our very first episode of Pre-Race Pulse right here on Racing America. Now, we wanted to give you a show that really dove into the race weekend, talking about key storylines, our predictions, taking a look back at last year's event, and what we think might happen this year. We also, of course, wanted to talk about the latest NASCAR news and happenings within our motorsports world. My name's Taylor Kitchen. I'll be your host for Pre-Race Pulse, and so will Alan Cavano. You'll get to see him in a future episode, but without further ado, let's just dive right into it, talking about the NASCAR season so far. I feel like we were just at Daytona, you guys. It's insane to think that we're already on race 10, and these seasons are so long. NASCAR has one of the longest seasons in all of sports, and with that, you gotta take a break. Everyone needs a break to kind of relax and chill, and that's exactly what these Cup Series drivers did this past weekend. While the Xfinity and Truck Series were at Rockingham, the Cup Series drivers were taking a little bit of a break. Now, if you're Ty Gibbs, you're going to London. I'm a little jealous. I've always wanted to go to London, but it looks like this trip was super fun, super relaxing. Looks like he had a good time outside of the country. Or you could be involved in a little bit of chaos, which is what Kyle Larson was involved in at WWE. And I was laughing my head off. I saw this meme. I don't know if you guys have seen this too, but the Buc-ee's meme where Kyle Larson's just kind of looking up at everything going on, and he looked like the Buc-ee's logo. It was so funny, but good to see him and his family enjoying some time at the WWE event. Or if you're like me and Carson Hocevar, you were at Rockingham enjoying NASCAR's return to the Rock. We're going to talk about it in a second, but Carson Hocevar clearly enjoyed his time watching some racing. Take a listen.
Aspire, Track Enterprise, everybody to put this race on. There's a lot of connections for me from that side, but I'm a race fan. I don't have a lot of fun going to beaches and besides maybe girls, but other than that, I can get myself in less trouble, I'm sure, but this is where I have most fun anyways.
So glad to hear Carson Hocevar really enjoyed his time, and quite frankly, I thought the race was awesome. I thought the atmosphere was fantastic. We were a little concerned going into the race weekend, looking at practice, that it was going to be more of a one-groove type of track. We were a little nervous. Luckily, though, our nerves were calmed, and we had some incredible racing across the board, and some emotional wins, too. You look at Tyler Ankrum, for instance, who broke a 130-race winless streak. So we had a Cinderella story for the Truck Series. For the Xfinity Series, not so much. Jesse Love dominated most of the race, ended up winning it, and then unfortunately was disqualified after post-race tech, giving the win to Sammy Smith. Now, we're covering the disqualification and RCR's appeal of the disqualification over on Racing America on SI. So for all of those updates and the latest news around that, make sure to check that out there. But outside of the winners for the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, we got to talk about a big name that returned to the track this weekend in NASCAR, and that is Kasey Kahne. It was a fantastic Kasey Kahne Friday. I hope you all had a fantastic Kasey Kahne Friday last weekend, but it was so good to see him back in NASCAR and to see the fans' reaction to it. Now, he qualified incredibly well, qualified fourth for this event. He had a car that we thought could win potentially. Unfortunately, though, was caught in an incident. Despite all the damage, though, was able to come back for a top 15 finish. Now, that brings me to my question that I had. Could we see Kasey Kahne more this season? Could we see him more through the next few years within NASCAR? And he kind of answered that question for us. Take a listen.
I enjoyed it. I definitely have enjoyed, I've really looked forward to it and put a lot into it. It was really fun working with the RCR group, going up to their shop again, just being part of a NASCAR team again, that was really cool. And all the people at RCR were great. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't know about more in the future, but I'm really glad I did this. And I wish it would have went much different, but I think we were very competitive and had a shot at being somewhere in that top 5 if things go our way throughout.
So with Kasey Kahne's return, emotional wins, big moments at Rockingham, this weekend was a huge success. I loved seeing the enthusiasm around this event, and major props to NASCAR and everyone involved in getting this event put together. I truly hope it returns in 2026 for years to come. The Cup Series, I would love to see them have a date here in the future too, though that's out of my hands, but it was a fantastic event. I'm curious if any of you guys were there. Let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about past stars of NASCAR, talking about the 2026 NASCAR Hall of Fame nominees. There are 2 new names I want to talk about that were added to the modern era ballot. Kurt Busch is one of them, a Daytona 500 champ. He's won a championship in his career, won 32 Cup Series races, definitely warranted to be on that list. Also warranted Randy LaJoie, a 2-time Xfinity Series champion, won multiple races in that series as well. Definitely 2 great adds to that modern era ballot. But how are we deciding who goes into the Hall of Fame? Who decides it and when? Well, there is a committee that meets on May 20th that will cast their vote for 2 modern era folks within the industry and 1 pioneer name to be put into the NASCAR Hall of Fame for 2026. But they're not the only ones that get their voices heard. You do too. If you go to NASCAR.com/fanvote, you get to decide who we should put into the Hall of Fame. So make sure your voice is heard. I will say for me, if I had to pick 2 from the modern era and 1 pioneer ballot nominee to put into the Hall of Fame, Tim Brewer and Neil Bonnet stick out to me in the modern era ballot. I mean, just their success within the sport. You think of Tim Brewer's success with Junior Johnson and his team, and you think about what they did in their broadcasting careers and kind of elevating the sport. I think they are well deserving of a spot in the Hall of Fame. Now, if you look at the pioneer ballot, there's no question to me. Banjo Matthews definitely deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. I mean, if you drove a Ford, any type of Ford, whatever that is, in NASCAR from the 70s to the 80s, and you won a race, you have Banjo Matthews to thank. So definitely for me, worthy of a Hall of Fame spot. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Last but not least, from our news, the NASCAR All-Star format was just released. Now, I'm not going to talk about it a lot here. We're going to be talking about it as the race approaches, so you are all well in the know ahead of the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro. But in case you're curious about the format right now, head over to Racing America on SI and we'll give you a full preview. But right now, let's get into our hot topics ahead of our Talladega race weekend, talking about what you should be looking out for as we race at the Super Speedway. Starting off with the Fords. I feel like this season we've had so many close wins for the Fords, but they just haven't been able to get there, except if you are the Wood Brothers Racing team with Josh Berry at Vegas. But it's crazy for me to think that Team Penske led almost 67% of the laps between Daytona and Atlanta and had really nothing to show for it. So how can they pull it together at Talladega? How can they get themselves into victory lane? And we all know it's making sure that you are mistake-free all across the board, and sometimes there is a little bit of luck involved. But you look at some of the Ford drivers, like Brad Keselowski, for instance. I mean, he's won at Talladega 6 times, tied with, Jeff Gordon and Dale Jr. The only one ahead of them in wins at Talladega is going to be Dale Sr., of course, with 10. But for Brad, I know he's had a tough season, but maybe this is where he can turn it around. I would love to see Ford find themselves in victory lane at a track that they've historically been so good at. They have a win streak from 2015 to 2018 that is unmatched. And then we got to the Gen 7 car, and they only have 1 win with Ryan Blaney in 2023. So very curious to keep my eye on the Fords and see how they do this race weekend. But speaking of Ryan Blaney in 2023 and his win and his success at this track, he's coming into this race with a newer pit crew. That's right. His other tire changer, Skip Flores, that was on the 12, is moving over to the 38. And Keystone France, who was on the 38, is moving over to the 12 as the front tire changer. Now, Skip Flores talked about this a little bit on Stacking Pennies this week with Corey LaJoie about what he's feeling about the change, and he really is looking at this as a mentorship opportunity. How does he bring a younger pit crew on the 38 team to race-winning caliber? How does he make them a consistent top 15, top 20, maybe even team? And I think with his mentorship and experience in the sport, he can really help that team elevate what they're doing. And for Keystone France, he's not new to Penske. He was on the number 2 car of Austin Cindric in 2024, so returning kind of to familiar roots here, but with Ryan Blaney, I am very curious to see how this swap works, if it will help Ryan Blaney, and hopefully get him into victory lane, as he's been so close a few times this season already. The last hot topic I have for you was about I'm going to call him a famous name within the YouTube media community that is going to be in the ARCA field this weekend. That's right, it's Cleetus McFarland. Now, if you remember at Daytona, the one-liners, the quotes he had, and just the energy he brought was phenomenal. The eyes he brought was phenomenal, so it will be awesome to see him this weekend racing at Talladega. He did actually get to have a little bit of a mentorship session with Dale Jr., and Dale Jr. gave him the following notes. Don't put your car on the apron and hug that yellow line. That's it. And basically said good luck, but great content from him and Dale Jr., of course, but Cleetus McFarland wishing him the best in his race at Talladega. It should be a pretty exciting one. But speaking of Talladega and some insights from Dale Jr. at least, let's preview this track, this 2.66 mile super speedway that is just chaotic. It can be messy and it can produce some of the most thrilling races of all time. I think back to like 2000 when Dale Sr. went from 18th, something like that, to first in the span of 4 laps. That is a phenomenal finish that will live in my brain when I think about Talladega. I also think about 2010, the Aaron's 499, where we had probably one of the most competitive Talladega races of all time. We saw tandem drafting. We saw a crazy amount of lead changes. That last lap pass for Kevin Harvick to go around Jamie McMurray to win that race, oh my gosh, you guys, that race was iconic, one of my favorites. And if you want a more recent example of incredible moments at Talladega, think about 2023 with Ryan Blaney, when it's Blaney, Harvick, it's gonna be Blaney. That call from Rick Allen was so good. And that moment really is what set up that 12 team to get that championship that year. So there are so many good moments at Talladega, and definitely a good moment for Tyler Reddick last spring when he won that race in a last lap shootout where Brad Keselowski was getting a run on Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell pulled the block, and all chaos just broke loose. All chaos just happened. Here's what he had to say about it.
Just a lot of things happened in a matter of seconds right there at the end. But yeah, when it kind of broke apart there, I was of the same mindset as Billy's talking about. It's like, all right, let's just bring it back in one piece. There's been so many speedway races, not just in the next gen era, but in the Gen 6 era, where the days have gone pretty good, but I come home absolutely destroyed, wrecked. And I'm pretty sure that's like the first speedway race I've brought a car back with only maybe a couple scratches on it.
So absolutely a wild win for Tyler Reddick, but a great win for that 45 team. The one thing that was very keen in my brain during this race and the super speedway races to follow was fuel saving. Now, it's nothing new. Fuel saving has been a thing in NASCAR since the beginning of time, but why are we talking about it much more now? What gives? Well, we have this issue with the Gen 7 car, and maybe not an issue per se, but it all has to do with the Gen 7 car and this single lug tire. So when these cars are on pit road, they're spending way less time on pit road to change these tires because we have the one lug. However, you have to spend so much time on pit road to pack these cars full of fuel. So you're kind of disproportionate in the time that you're spending on pit road from changing your tires to packing your car full of fuel. So to kind of counteract that, you save fuel on the racetrack, so you're burning less fuel. So when you go to pit road, the time you're spending to change the tire versus packing your car full of fuel, that's a mouthful, matches up. So you're seeing these cars go maybe a little slower on the racetrack to conserve fuel. And a lot of this too has to do with track position. Passing in the field in this Gen 7 car is difficult, especially at these super speedway types of tracks. It is hard to get that track position back when you make a mistake or when you spend way too much time on pit road. So fuel saving is definitely going to come into play this race. It is a strategy call by these teams. Will we see any of the teams kind of push their luck a little bit? I don't know, but something to look out for ahead of this weekend. And speaking of this weekend, predictions. I don't know who you guys think will be in the top 5. I'm going to say for the Xfinity Series, you got to bank on RCR. One of those two drivers, Jesse Love or Austin Hill, finishing inside the top 5 for this race. So I'm going to have those two drivers in my top 5. I feel like Justin Allgaier is a pretty easy pick for a top 5 at Talladega. He's either in the big one or he's winning a race here. So Justin Allgaier. And then I'm going to pick some 2 dark horse picks here. And maybe not so much dark horse picks, but you think of Brennan Poole and how successful he's been at Alpha Prime this season, coming off of a top 5 finish at Rockingham. They've been so close winning at these super speedway events. I think Brennan Poole could pull out a top 5, as well as Ryan Sieg. He almost won this race in the fall, almost won at Talladega in the fall. It was a nail-biter, heartbreaker. I'd love to see him in victory lane. For the Cup Series, a little bit of a different story. I mean, you got to throw Ryan Blaney in there, probably Austin Cindric, the Penske crew that's done so well at these super speedway tracks. I'm going to throw them into the mix for a top 5. Throw in Brad Keselowski. I'm going to say Bubba Wallace. He's so good at these types of tracks. And Kyle Busch. He's been so close to winning at some of these super speedway races, and I think it's time for him to find victory lane again. I would love to see him find victory lane. I think this could be where he does it. But everybody, thank you all so much for tuning in to our very first episode of Pre-Race Pulse. You can find us here talking about NASCAR the weekend ahead every single Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We enjoyed you guys coming here, watching the video. Make sure to follow us and make sure to leave a comment about what you thought about what we talked about. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.